This is True Multifamily, the show where we dive in on what really happens after closing a multifamily property. We're going to expose the role of asset manager. That's a person who has the responsibility of seeing the vision, executing the plan, and managing people, budgets, and timelines, all to deliver returns for our investors. These are the real struggles, the real victories, and the real stories of asset management. Welcome back to another episode of True Multifamily. I am here with Stace Caseria. Stace, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here because we're going to talk a lot about marketing and branding and building trust. And I love that topic, as we're just talking about before the show, just how you do that. And I've been around that a lot, and I love hearing it, and absolutely critical in 2020 and going now into 2021, where seemingly the whole world is blown up. We don't know who to trust, where to turn. How can a company or a person connect with someone virtually and build trust? So there's so many great topics that I want to get into with you. But before we get there, please give our audience a little bit of a background on who you are and what your real estate looks like.
Sure. So I've been investing for a little bit more than 20 years, started with a single family home. And since then, my brother and I have accumulated a small portfolio of singles and doubles in Connecticut. I live outside of Boston now, and I own a small apartment building here. And I'm also investing passively in a syndication. But I'm looking to do more of that. Eventually, I want to run a syndication of my own, but I feel like there's more I've got to learn. But it's not my day job yet. My day job is running a branding agency. And I'm always trying to find those intersections of how can I bring my marketing expertise over to my real estate, because I don't want to run my real estate like a hobby. I've seen a lot of people do that. I want to run it like a business, but not just like a business. I want to run it like apply marketing to it, and the marketing principles that I see work in other areas, just apply them here and make these properties run more smoothly like you would any other business, like software business or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I love that. So often, when you go to a RIA meeting or networking meeting, not so much lately, but everyone's got the same 5 Vistaprint business cards, and it's like there's so much missing in the businesses that we're running when it comes to branding and marketing. And so I love that approach, and I love that you're and obviously much more than just a business card, but building a brand and a reputation is so encompassing. And I love that you're seeing such a parallel between your agency and real estate. But before the real estate, let's talk about the agency a little bit. Tell us where that came from and what kind of work you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. So the agency is called Trust Deep. Trust Deep refers to a theory I have. So I say like every relationship you have, whether it's with a spouse, a friend, your kids, employees, partners, vendors, whatever, there are 3 kinds of relationships you have. People know you, people like you, and people trust you. So I didn't invent that, but that's a paradigm that I use. And I say every relationship falls into one of those categories. So I like to think that like people knowing you starts in your head, people liking you happens in your heart, people trusting you is one level down in the gut. That's where Trust Deep comes from. So you'd say to somebody, what kind of relationship do you have with him? Well, I have a Trust Deep relationship. We go Trust Deep. So
I love it.
Our agency is like focused on not just helping people win customers, but create lifelong advocates. And so we focus on these 4 things. I call it the trust dynamic, and there are 4 parts of it. I want to help my clients become trustworthy so that they create lifelong advocates and customers. Because that's ultimately the strongest foundation. You get down to that, and you've got an army of people who are out there preaching your gospel about your business or your brand, your company or whatever. And that's the real gold for me is to do those things rather than, a lot of branding agencies will talk about like image. Like I like to craft image, but based on substance. And I have a somewhat scientific approach to that. So I feel like we've got that angle there. And as an advertising professional, this just makes me feel more fulfilled as what I do. So I've worked on brands like Delta Airlines, Bose, Panasonic, Heineken, Jameson, Absolute Vodka. I've worked on tons and tons, but like I always felt there was something missing, and I didn't have the influence at that level, working with massive companies or in a large advertising
Hmm.
agency, to have that sort of connection with somebody who's starting a business, somebody who's running a business, somebody who's trying to launch something new, like to get in there and influence them, find out what drives them, and communicate that out to people. That's what's going to ultimately attract a really loyal following, is when people see your mission and understand your mission. Obviously they have to align with that, but
Hmm.
that's the stuff that I focus on, and I'm excited every day to do.
Well, number one, that's great. Like you're excited, you're getting up, you're running a business, so that's fantastic. Tell me, like, who's your ideal customer? What does a typical project look like for you at this agency?
Yeah, so it runs the gamut. So a lot of what I have out here as far as clients in the area, there's tons of technology out here and tons of financial services. So um, we just started a project with a new software company. It's a startup, and they've got like maybe 3 or 4 employees. That's my ideal customer, when I can get in at that level and help them create a brand, help them find out what drives them, their values, their vision, and build that foundation. And that foundation isn't just for marketing. That helps steer their entire company, the decisions they're going to make about
Mhm.
hiring or the products they have, or if they're doing like store design or the customer experience. That's the level where I have the greatest influence, where I feel I can really add value. So we create content too at our agencies. So like blogs, ebooks, websites, social media, we do all that too, but a lot of people can do that. I think the real value we offer is at the foundational level, creating a brand, not just visual identity, but all the foundational documents like mission, vision, values.
So what I was
That
going to ask about next is that's what it sounds like you're going is so if I'm you said 3 to 4 customer type company, so I'm pretty new, just sort of getting started, maybe what, 6 months in or
yeah,
something. And, I'm sort of testing out this business. Now it's time to say, well, what does my business stand for?
mhm.
Who are we? Right. And
Why are
how do
we
we
here?
market ourselves? Why? Okay. Great question too. Why are we even
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
And so just talk me through that process a little bit. Like if I'm an entrepreneur, as I am, and most of our listeners are or want to be business owners and own multifamily properties, of course, all usually in a company. So if you can speak to that a little bit, like how do I, as a someone who wants to buy property, start to think about these questions and mission and vision and frame what my company might look like?
That's awesome. So here's the thing: is like I approach my rentals as with a different kind of mindset. I firmly believe that my tenants are not necessarily tenants, they're customers. And so that means I have to bring a certain level of customer service to them. The same way, like if I owned a hardware store, I would treat my customers a certain way. I would use proven marketing principles to create a great experience for them, so they choose me over any other hardware store. It makes sense. It works the same way, whether it's a bank or a hardware store or shoes or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many investors and like going to meetups and stuff and talking to people, and they see their tenants as like this necessary evil, and there's this like level of animosity, and they're like, these, and I just don't see people treating them like this customer service mindset. I say to like business owners, figure out why you're in business, and I would say there's probably a deeper reason, or there's something, a more articulate reason, but I say we're here to serve our tenants, and we need to figure out what's special about us. Um, there are so many. I mean, people have a lot of places to live, and right now it might be a tight housing market. But let's say, I mean, there was more demand than there was more supply than demand. You're going to need to find some way to stand out, and creating a brand, even if it's a personal brand, and you don't have to go through a full branding exercise. Just understanding what your purpose is, figuring that out, discovering it, defining it, even informally, and then making sure that you find a way to articulate it to your customers, your tenants, or your property manager, or any employees you have. So everybody is treating your customers the same way, and everybody is moving toward the same vision that you have. You've set this true north, and you're all aiming toward that. Like I had a property manager who I let go in September, and I just didn't like the way they were working with my tenants. And now I'm self-managing that property. I was gonna find another property manager, but it's going fine. So I'm like, oh, this building's sort of on cruise control. I mean, no problems at the moment. So I'm happy with that. But I need to have my employees seeing my vision, and the people in my building, I should ultimately think of them as how I would want somebody to treat my family, right? I mean, that's a stretch for some people to see it that way, but that's ultimately what I want. And I have to create a brand. I have to create this identity for myself and make sure that translates across everything I do. So all my actions, every interaction with them. Like,
Hold on right there. I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to pause because you hit us with so much great content,
sorry.
and that I 100% we're going to get into exactly that. But I want to just break down the first part. So the what, which is what, and then you're going to get me into the how for sure. So the what of what you said is that you have a mission, and that is not just words that you wrote down on a piece of paper one time in some exercise and forgot about, but something that your company lives and breathes, so that every day when you're treating your tenants or you're thinking about a property or the people who represent
vendors,
vendors like a property manager, a contractor, do these people fit within our circle? And so I'll give you an example for what we do. My partners and I, and Stace and I did not plan this ahead of time, but what we have, so my partners and I work in the DeRosa group, and our mission is to transform lives through real estate. And so there's so many great feelings and emotions that come out of that. But what it really boils down to is transforming our tenants' lives and our investors' lives and our own lives personally, right? We all have to win, win, win in this scenario. But what that also means in the details is when it comes out to it and we're building out a CapEx plan, it's not just how do we scrape by and get as much rent as possible and provide the least amount of service and make the highest margin. It's how do we make this property better? How do we make our tenants' lives better? How do we improve their lives? How do we transform them from where they are? How do we transform this property, this area, right? And so we invest in things like playgrounds. We invest in things like financial courses for our tenants. We invest in all these things that you don't have to, and they may not impact the bottom line, or I may not be able to get $20 more per month, but it's the right thing to do. It fits within our mission statement. It makes us feel good. And frankly, probably allows us to raise more money and bring on more people, attracts more people to us because we have a very strong mission that we can stand behind and point to all these examples. Is that really what you're saying here?
Wow. Yes, exactly. I mean, there's this other thing happening, and you said it there. You're talking about transforming lives, and I hear the phrase value add so often, and I've sat through so many webinars for syndicators, and they talk about value add, and they forget to mention their tenants. So I'm like, you're adding value to a property, a unit, but they don't say they're adding value to somebody's life, and that's a different way to look at this concept of value add. And when you say, does it translate to the bottom line? It absolutely does, because I bet you're able to keep tenants longer, and I bet you're able to raise rent as needed without any resist, or without probably less resistance, because people see a value exchange and they understand that this isn't just transactional. They matter to you, and then you can do this if you have like a 6-unit building or like 60 units. I mean, you just have your property manager or your employees handling that rollout. But that is exactly the point. Is like you've set down a mission, and again, it's not just words on a page. You're living it, because it's not. It's like the actions that bring it to life. That's what you're doing, and that's superb.
Oh, thank you.
We did not rehearse that. I know. Like, this is perfect. It's like you need to come and do an infomercial for me.
Anytime, my friend. So, okay. So I cut you off. You told us the what. Tell us about your how and how you build trust and how you treat your tenants. You said you treat them like family. So that's a big statement. So most landlords would probably cringe when they hear that or ignore
I do too.
it.
Even saying it, I cringe, because I know. I can give you an example. Check this out.
Let's hear it.
So with some of the tactics, some of the stuff that you've described, like goes far above and beyond what I'm doing. So, I mean, we can learn a lot from what you said there, but I'll just share like my small example. So I've got these 2 tenants who've lived in this building I inherited them. They've lived there almost 20 years. And I would say they're a little bit difficult, but difficult sort of like if you had like a pain in the ass aunt or uncle, like these are those people, but they're nice people. They're just like, like anything you do, they question, like, why are you doing that? It didn't used to be like this, like, but I have to always remind myself that these people are somebody's family. And at the moment I have to act like I'm feeling that I'm rewarded, that they're in my life, they're in my building, and I have to treat them. I have to be patient. It reminds me all the time, because they just like these, like something like these crazy things, like they call you and you're like what? And I want to lose my patience. I'm like, you know what? These people, like, I don't know them closely, but they matter to somebody. They're human beings and they matter. And I feel there's a value to me that, first of all, they're changing my life by getting me to be more patient. But when I am able to understand what they need, I'm able to show empathy. I can't always do what they ask me to do, but I listen to them and they appreciate that. It's the same thing with, it's a lesson we can learn with any interaction we have with people. Empathy is essentially listening to somebody, understanding where they're coming from, and validating their points of view or them as a person just by listening to them. It doesn't mean I agree with them, but I listen to them. So that's one of the things. And it's like, how do I make my mission and what they want like line up? Because that, to me, that's the ultimate, that's what brand is, that intersection. And there's this one instance where they were talking about, like, I wanted to redo the front of the building, and they were talking about how they like the lilies or flowers, and like gave me such a hard time about, like, I wanted to plant like something else. But at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? I want to beautify it. They've lived here for longer than I've owned this building. So like, it was like, let me see if there's a way that I can make this work. But something else I've done with them, and I know that like the holidays are important to them. So I decided, like, every year I'm going to, for Thanksgiving, I give all the tenants like a gift card to the local supermarket, so that I'm like, because the thing is, like, I want to support family gatherings. I know this year it's a little bit hard to do that, to get together, but nonetheless, that's something that supports that. I can say, food in my mind, I grew up in an Italian family. Food in my mind is like this thing that brings family together.
Yeah,
so like,
yeah, of course.
that's part of the brand, and it's like a small thing. And like some of your listeners are probably might be at a higher scale than what I'm doing, but it's like these lessons where I'm trying to think about, how do I give my tenants a feeling of ownership? Because this isn't like I'm selling them a pair of shoes or a car. This is where they live, and it's central to our being, like where we look. So like, I'm like, I want them to have a sense of ownership without them pushing it too far. Like, ultimately I own the building, but like when they had such an opinion on what the building looked like, the front of it, I'm like, this is fantastic. These people are never going anywhere. I want them to live here forever. And if it means planting lilies or whatever it is, done.
Whatever it takes. Totally.
But it's like understanding where they come from, and like helping them, feel comfortable in this home. Because like at the end of the day, I leave and I come back to my house.
Right. You're not looking at the lilies all day, right?
I'm not, but they're there. They live there, and it means something. Like, our homes are like incredibly personal to us. And like, as landlords, we should feel like we have this amazing power to make somebody's life better. I mean, you said it more eloquently a minute ago when you said transforming people's lives. Yep. Boom, that's it, right?
That's it. Well, let me ask you from the other side, because some people might say, well, Stace, that's great, and that's, the lilies is fine, but where does it end, and how do we draw a line of professionalism or spacing between landlord tenant? And have you run into any trouble with that, where they're asking and you're thinking, well, this is like my crazy great aunt, what would I do for my crazy great aunt versus this tenant here? Can you talk us through that a little bit and towing that line?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, I want to say I'm not in this for the money, but obviously I'm in this for the freedom that it gives, that has the potential to give me. But if something doesn't work with my financial plan, if I had like a team, and they were overlooking the bottom line, and somebody were to say, you know what, that decision doesn't make sense because you've got a brand, but without a sustainable business, you don't have anything. So I have to look at it, and that's where I draw the line. If something doesn't make sense, if it takes me away from, I'm trying to think of an example where they asked me for something, I'm like, that just doesn't line up with what I want here. But I know with like rent increases. So something I've decided to do is when I need to increase the rent, and I do it every year because I want to train my tenants to understand there's going to be a rent increase every year, and even this year. So it's probably going to be a little bit less. But what I do is I do like a market survey of rents. I use Rentometer, and I also will go on Craigslist and apartments.com, and I'll create like a little package of comparable prices and show people what's available and say, I'm raising the rent. I'd love for you to stay. If not, here's some other places. Here's the thing is that they can see that like, oh, that place is a lot more expensive, but it's a little bit nicer, or this place is like less expensive, but it's dingy. So I want to be completely transparent. Like, they don't need me to provide that. They can go and look, but what I'm showing them is that I care. And like, I'm trying to be, my mission is always to be a little bit below like the market rent, because I'd rather have longevity. But that has not stopped me from raising the rent. And this year, when or the last time I raised the rent, like somebody said to me, "Oh, that's not that bad." I mean, because that's not the typical reaction I've had in the past before I started this program. Like, it's not that bad. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, and I walked out of there, happy, or I mailed the stuff, or that people text me and stuff like that. But I want to stay in constant contact with these people and be transparent. But to answer your question, I draw the line at something that is going to hurt my ability to maintain this business in a way that, like, I need a certain ROI every month. Like, not that it's a numbers game, but like, in order for me to do this, I have to have a game plan, and I have to stick to that. That's part of my brand. All of our brands is like having that true north that we're aiming toward. And it might be to be X amount of profit, or it might be to scale a certain amount, or whatever it is. I have to balance those things. And if somebody's asking for something that's unreasonable, I'm not going to do it. I mean, the crazy aunt, sometimes you got to say no to her, right? I mean, so.
Totally. 100%. I love it. I think it makes total sense. There's a lot of parallels between your agency and the landlording business, and how you're treating both. And really, your landlording business is sort of like a customer of your agency, right? And you've got to build that brand and that trust. But so let's dig in a little bit, if we can, thinking of the avatar of our listener who might have a multifamily property or two, maybe small multi, wants to get into bigger multi, is probably starting to, they're hearing podcasts, they're thinking, should I have a podcast? Should I have a brand? What is a brand? Do I need to pay someone for a logo? Like, let's just sort of talk about, how a brand starts, and what do I need to go pay, Stace $50,000, if that's what you charge, I have no idea, to build me a brand and guidelines and color palettes, or, how do I just start the ball rolling, and how do I also think about these things that we talked about at the beginning, like mission and the values and all of that. So give me a little bit of a step-by-step, if you can.
Sure. So the last thing you said is the first thing to think about. So brand, let's define brand for everybody. So brand is the overall feeling of your business. It's a combination of things. It's the trajectory you're on. It's the goal. It's the values that you have. It's a bunch of intangible things that are the feeling that you get when somebody interacts with you, somebody reads some of your content, somebody's on your website, somebody's listening to your podcast. Like, the feeling they get is your brand, like the thing that's left. And that comes through your actions. It comes through your communications. It comes through, like, even like you said, your logo, your website, your visual representation. So I say brand is see plus say plus do. The stuff I say, and that's all my communications. The stuff I do, those are my interactions, whether they're in person or virtually. And the stuff you see, which is like my image, it's like color palettes, typeface, logo, obviously, the design of my website. If I had a store, it's the layout of my store. If I had a restaurant, it's like what the service looks like. I mean, like when I plate food and bring it to you, like that's part of my brand. To understand what those things should be, you have to understand your values. You have to understand like what drives you, what's important to you, what's important to your customers. And again, it's that intersection. The problems that I solve, the the reason that I'm here. Those things are all questions you have to answer in order to form your brand. And let's not think that a brand is only Nike or Amazon or Cadillac or something like that. You or and you have a personal brand. Like, so a brand can be personal, it can be one person. It can be a professional brand. It could be your company, a small company. And you don't need to spend $50,000, although I would love it if you came to me and spent $50,000. I would find something for 50, but you can do
We'll set up a referral code for our listeners.
Right.
It'll be $49.99.99.
Awesome. Awesome. But you need to do some sort of investigation. So what we do are these brand discovery workshops, and the process is to ask a lot of questions to get to the heart of what's driving you. Like, I say, why are you in business? And I say, oh, I'm in business to own properties. No, there's a deeper reason, and you probably know it, and it's probably there. We just need to extract it, and that's what we do. So, like the software company, I have a new client that's a restaurant chain. They have like 10 restaurants in the area. Doing a brand workshop with them on Monday. So we're going to sit down for several hours, and we're going to do these exercises. I'm going to ask them these questions, and they're going to start thinking about things they probably have never thought about or verbalized. But I guarantee you, like, the thing that drives them is in there somewhere. It's just a matter of extracting it, and then we define it. We have to define it so that it's clear, not just for them, but for their employees. And in this case, they have franchisees. It's got to be clear to them, and they have to be able to communicate it to their customers. If you can't articulate why you're different or what you stand for, you're not going to have resonance with customers. You're not going to have meaning. If you don't have meaning, you can't create deep loyalty. The brands that we're loyal to in our lives, whether it's Apple or Amazon or Nike or Polo, whatever it is, they have meaning with us beyond the product or service. Like, so, I have Apple products, and it's like, I enjoy their product. I enjoy what drove Steve Jobs to do his thing. The products work flawlessly, but there's a message behind them. And it wouldn't have mattered if it didn't resonate with people. But Steve Jobs had these ideas about, like, I want to simplify technology so that people can communicate and create more easily. But if people didn't have that need, he would have been in his garage, like, tinkering on who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that mission, and it has to intersect with something people need. So anybody who's starting a business and wants to scale up has to ask themselves, what do I do better than anyone else? Like, what problem can I solve, and what problem do people need me to solve? And sometimes they're exactly the same, and sometimes you need to tweak what you do so it resonates with people. That's how it starts, understanding that. Good. And all that other stuff, like logo, website, color palette, tagline, it springs out of your brand. It's not born in a vacuum. So, like, it doesn't happen accidentally. So like, we're doing a branding project for the software company. So we did a branding discovery process, and then we did logo after that, because now we understand what's important to them. They're like, oh, these 5 things are the attributes this is why we're in business. Like, oh, cool. Now we can develop this simple little thing that telegraphs to people something about that. I'm just thinking about the Tesla logo. I was thinking about that today, and I never knew what that was. It's that T, and it's got like the curved top. And it's obviously, I always thought it was like some kind of like scientific device, but it's like a cross section of an electric motor. And I'm
heard
like,
that.
That's deep. I mean, like, I never knew that, but like, people won't necessarily get that, but you look at it and you understand, oh, science-y kind of thing. But there's a level of like interest and that goes down, and you start to understand that, and you're like, okay, now I get a little bit more about this. I understand what drives them, no pun intended, but but all of that comes out of what they stand for. And the FedEx logo, for instance, do you ever see the arrow in the FedEx logo? Okay, so like,
I got a marketing degree in college.
Okay.
So we had a whole class on all that. But for the listeners, there's a little hidden arrow, like always moving forward, that sense of motion, right?
That's right.
The Amazon, right? The A to Z, right?
The A to Z.
I love that
smile.
stuff.
Yeah. So, but all those things spring out of, those things weren't done accidentally by a graphic designer who thought he was clever one day.
Right.
It comes out of like the brand and that process. And you're like, oh, this is what we stand for. And like, how do we articulate this to people? Because if we can't tell them, there's no way they're ever going to know why we're different from choices B, C, D, and E. I mean, they're just going to go and pick somebody else. I mean, luckily every now and then they'll pick us, but like, we don't want to We don't want to leave it to that. We want to create like a clear differentiators, and we want to create loyalty, and we want to rule whatever industry we're in. I do anyway.
I love all of that. We went through an exercise with one of my companies, and we created core values, which came out of an exercise like this. And it was 5 phrases that really summed up who we are, what we do, what we look for, how we work. And it became a guiding light. Like, we all put it on our phones, and it was a swipe screen. And so everyone sort of burned into our brains, but it helped us hiring, right? Does this person fit this criteria? If they don't have one, or they're not really going to jive with it, well, they're not probably a good fit for us, right? And so, but just having that core value established, that brand, that mission, starting up front, even you should hire Stace, but if you don't, at least sit down and try to write it out yourself,
right,
and figure out, like, what do you stand for?
We have templates on our website. People can download like a mission statement template and download it from there, and they can do it on their own.
Perfect time for a plug. Tell us the website.
It's trustdeepagency.com. So three words all together, trustdeepagency.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Stace Caseria. I might be the only Stace on there. So, it's easy to get in touch with us. But if people had questions, we answer questions like this all the time, cool. from people, just like
so you'll help me if I come to you with my worksheet filled out. You'll help me, give me some guidance, and figure out, make sure.
But the core values, it's interesting that you say that, because like values have to be more than just something that's written down, but like from what you're describing, like people lived it, and it helps you make decisions. It speeds things up, because like, who do we hire? Well, they have to fit this criteria. Like, what products do we offer? They have to fit this criteria. Like, where do we open stores? They have to, you know what I mean? It helps you make decisions. Like, you wouldn't think of like going to the bank to get a loan for a business without a business plan, but like what you're describing should be part of it. It's just that bankers don't know to look for those things. But if they did, if they had a degree in marketing,
there you go,
they would understand, like, these are things that are critical, and businesses that go through this process are more successful. We see it in our daily lives. We choose to pay more for products from brands that give us like this consistent, well-rounded experience. It's not accidental. Somebody sat down and made this happen.
Everything that you're saying is so powerful, and it's powerful for a company like Nike, for those other companies you mentioned, but it's also powerful to the individual entrepreneur, the person that is just starting out, maybe has a few properties, because as Stace has shown us, how we treat our tenants, how we treat our customers, our property managers, it all flows into the brand, the personal brand of you. And then if you decide to put a name on it and a company and a logo, but it all starts with that core mission and what's inside of you and what you want out of it. So I love all of that, top to bottom, just really, really insightful. And, any other tips for someone as they're trying to think about this? Because I will say that I connect with a lot of entrepreneurs that want to be raising money or doing apartment deals, and all the websites look the same, like the big stock photography, big tall buildings, and they all say the same thing. Their names kind of sound the same, and the logos kind of look the same. So how do we stand out? Let's say, right, I want financial freedom for my family, which is probably a very common thing that people say. I want time to spend with my kids. How do I build a brand around that sort of stands out and is different from every other person on the street?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would say that branding is not important for real estate people if the only people you want to invest is your family and friends. But if you want to go past that,
strong statement. I love it.
But here's what you have to do. Trust is a differentiator, and you cannot ask people to trust you. You have to demonstrate trustworthiness. And so the thing I would say is, like, again, my agency is built on helping people become trustworthy, not smoke and mirrors, like genuinely trustworthy. And we have these 4 factors that go into the thing that we call the trust dynamic. There are 4 things you need to show on your website in order to not just appear different, but truly be different. And so every interaction that people have with you through your website, through communications, you have a webinar, whatever, you have to think about these 4 things and build them into your communications. And the 4 things are credibility, track record, empathy, your ability to show empathy, and alignment of interests. And I can break those down because like they come in different proportions, depending on the type of transaction we're looking at, or whether, if, like I'm like buying a pair of shoes, or I'm at the hardware store, or like all those things are changing. But when we're talking about like somebody writing a check for $50,000 or $100,000, you need to hit on those at a high level. It's important that you don't just ask for trust. It's not going to work. You have to demonstrate trustworthiness. So credibility is your ability to speak articulately about the thing you're talking about. So on your website as a syndicator, if you're not speaking the lingo, and if you're talking, if like what you're describing sounds like fantastical, it's like doesn't sound like it's grounded in reality, you don't have credibility. Like, this, right? So like you meet people and in 30 seconds you're like, this dude knows what he's talking about, or like, he needs to do his homework,
right?
Before he opens his mouth again. That's credibility. Credibility is also your integrity, and I think of integrity as your values being in lockstep with my actions, or your actions. So that's integrity. That goes toward credibility, and people can see that, right? So if my website says I'm like, we're conservative underwriters, and then we offer this deal, and it's like it's not quite conservative, or it's like oh, there's no vacancy, and there's nothing in the horizon that would make us think there might be vacancy, or like the economy's awesome. You're like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, okay, well, so that's going to destroy credibility.
right.
The second part is track record. People think trust takes a long time to develop, and it sort of does. Track record is the only element that takes a long time. All the others can happen instantly. So track record is our ability to have repeatable events. So like, I've done something in the past. Is it likely that positive outcome is going to happen again? That's track record. If you're buying a car, you would think about reliability. That's track record. If you're a syndicator, you would say, I aim for X amount ROI, and here's how I've hit it. Not just when times are awesome, but like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and here are my projections, and here's why I predict that I can do this again because these factors are lining up. That's your track record. It's also your reputation. Like when you're not around and people are talking about you, what are they saying about you? They're saying something about you based on a past experience with you. And that's like trust. Some people define trust as, hope for the future based on events of the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's track record. And there are ways that you can describe that. If you're a first-time syndicator and you don't have track record, you actually do. Like, so I see this on LinkedIn where people have never done something before, but they're trying to break into something. But they either have experience in another career, or they're working with a network of people, a group of people. You've had partners who have experience in that, and you're borrowing some of their track record, and that's fine. If it's your first time, you've never done anything, you graduated college or you're out of high school, well, there got to be people who know you, who can speak for you, that you borrow some of that track record. And you see that on LinkedIn. I like where people say, like, you can go and look at people's past, and you say like, oh, this person recommended them for that. And then you hopefully you do some research, like, okay, this is genuine, that they work together at this company. I mean, the guy's not
LinkedIn kind of lays it out. You can really do that sleuthing on there.
You could, and you find that.
So hold on, before you move on, I love that idea. I actually used to give a talk about borrowing credibility because I was talking to investors that were first timers, but it was like their first time trying to raise money, either like on a smaller scale, like I'm trying to get a private loan to flip this house or for a rental or something. And it's like, well, how do you get the very first one? Well, you've got to start with who knows you and can vouch for you, right? And literally, if it's someone from some work that has worked with you in a different capacity and trusts you enough to move into, real estate, say, yeah, okay, I get it. But that's usually the hardest part. But if you can borrow somebody's credibility and say, look, yeah, I am new and I'm going to be transparent about this. I have great success over here. This thing I'm new at, but here's my plan, and here's who's going to help me with it. And by the way, I'm partners with this person who is not new. Mm-hmm. Then now I'm borrowing their credibility, to your point, and now we can together we have some credibility and a track record that someone can look into. That's exactly how I got my first syndication done, was I gave up as much equity as I had to and borrowed someone else's credibility. And, instead of me and my small amount of units, we had hundreds of units,
Yeah.
and we looked a lot more credible.
But no, don't say look, because you genuinely were more credible, because it wasn't
That's
just
right.
you with skin in the game. It was your partner with skin in the game. So it's like, it's absolutely, it's true. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, as long as you're being upfront and that person
Sure.
is involved, I think that's critical. I did something similar when I was buying my 6-unit building here. So I wanted some favorable terms from this lender, and I was working with the property manager at the time who had a good connection with them. So, I mean, he made the introduction, and the lender, didn't know me from anywhere. I'm like, so most of my property is in Connecticut. I'm trying to work out here in Boston, and but it works. I mean, so I was working with that property manager. I worked with him for a few years, and then that dissolved. But absolutely. So working with people is if you want to understand business or succeed in business, you have to understand people. You have to understand relationships. Nothing happens without a positive relationship.
Oh man. All right. That's going on the tweet quote when we
Cool.
put this episode up for sure.
Awesome.
So good. Okay. So what's the next phase? Are we on 3 or 4?
Oh yeah, no, we're on 3. It's
We're on 3.
empathy. So empathy, it's your ability to show empathy is like your ability to be human and relatable. And a lot of people in business will dismiss empathy as like a soft skill. It doesn't matter. It's actually, in my research and my experience, empathy builds trust quicker than anything else. And it's actually simple to do. So like, people want to know, like, even if we're investing in a product or investing in a building, there's a person behind that investment. And we need to know, is that person human? Can they relate to me? Can they relate to my problems? And as human beings, we need to know that, because we're not likely to form relationships with people who disagree with us, or people who aren't that don't have that same mindset. So think about like your friends. Like, so you have friends who you agree with on a number of things, and you hang out with them and you trust them, and you will share things about you because you know that either they're not going to judge you, or they're going to be receptive to that and offer you like solid advice, or they're just going to listen. That's empathy. It doesn't mean that you agree with them, because I'm sure you have friends who like bring you a situation and you're like, oh, this dude didn't handle it right or whatever. But you're listening to them.
Right.
When we listen to people, we validate their concerns, we validate their ideas, we validate them as a person. And it doesn't take anything other than listening. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them, or it doesn't mean we have to support them. It doesn't mean that, like, if they say, hey, this is what I want to do, give me 50 grand. It doesn't mean we have to do that. We just listen to them, and we might say, that doesn't work for me. I understand why you want to do it. But empathy builds trust so quickly. And all you have to do is listen. It's like the foundation of like human relationships.
Is empathy, how do I, maybe it's not possible. How do I scale that? Like, how do I show, if I'm building a brand or a message, like, how do I scale empathy? Or is that literally built in the one-on-one conversations that I have with every person that I interact with?
Yeah. So that's, I said they happen in different proportions, and face-to-face or one-on-one connections, or even like talking like on the Zoom or on the phone, that is a better way to build empathy. But you can still build empathy by listening. And what that means is you don't physically have to listen to people, but you have to understand what your customers want, and you have to show them that you've heard them. So like if you were looking for customers and you're like, hey, this group of investors that I want to attract, because you've narrowed down your target market, if they want properties in the Southeast that have that are family oriented, and they have some value add, but they're already kind of like, there's criteria. You say, these are the things we're hitting on. So that's showing empathy, because you know what your target people want, your target audience wants. If you were to just say, we're going to have awesome returns and everything's great, and it doesn't matter who you are, we attract every kind of investor. Well, I don't believe that, because I don't think you're looking out for the things that matter to me. So we're not going to have that same empathetic connection.
So thank you for breaking that down.
Yeah.
So helpful.
Yeah. And you ready for the last one?
I'm ready.
Okay. So the last one is alignment of interests. And so alignment of interest means that we have the same motivation and we also have the same intention. So it's a little bit different than empathy. So here we are aligned. Empathy, I was just listening to you and I respected you as a person. Here, we want to get to the same goal, but we want to get there in the same way. So if we agree on, oh, I want a 20% ROI and you say the same thing, but like I'm interested in cutting corners or I'm not as ethical as you, we might have the same goal, but like you've got this path and my path is like this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an alignment of interests. And you know, that's a very blatant example that I'm giving there. But like we know that there are there are people that we work with who are like, you know, I'm like my mother would say simpatico, like we are aligned on this, like we have the same sensibilities and we're marching forward together, you know, in lockstep. Alignment of interest for brands. And so if we take this out of real estate for a second, like alignment of interest is the thing that generates meaning for people. So they're brands that we like have meaning with us beyond the product or service. Alignment of interest allows meaning to be generated because we care about things that go beyond the pair of shoes, the car, you know, the restaurant that we like to go to, whatever. Like we care about family, or we care about our time. We care about like adventure, whatever it is.
You're talking about values, like core values again, right?
Absolutely. It comes right back to that. So that's what alignment of interest is. We have the same motivation. That's like our goal. And we have the same intention. Like we're going to get there along the same path. Those are the four things: credibility, track record, empathy, and alignment of interests. Those are the things that we look to build into our clients' communication so that they are more trustworthy. Can't ask people to trust you. It just doesn't work. But these are the things that when you focus on these things and you understand what your customers or ideal customer needs, you're able to build a more trustworthy relationship. It works the same in our personal relationships too. Like if we focus on these things, like I wish I had thought about this 20 years ago when I was just like starting off. I'm like, cause like I think about like some relationships or some jobs I've had. I'm like, why wasn't I advancing there? I'm like, I wasn't for this creative director. I wasn't hitting credibility, and you know what I mean. Like, not that I make mistakes all the time, but I do. I'm like,
we all do. Yeah.
But I try to look back and say, how could I have changed that situation? Now I have this framework, and it works for people, works for my clients, and I. Someday I'm going to write this book. It's going to be.
I'll be first in line to buy it. Tell you that.
Well, when I write it, I'm coming back on your show.
Please, we'll promote the heck out of it, and then we will have a promo code for our audience. Listen, I love everything you said. I love that you're a landlord and you own a small apartment and like you're buying multifamily. I love that you've got this agency going on and you've really broke down for us, you know, how to build a brand, how to think about a brand first, start with that core, the mission, the values, and build from there. And then, you know, through this framework, you know, that's really how you live your life. And so it's taking that core mission. What I hear you saying is I'm taking my core values and I'm living my life. And it's how I talk to people, how I interact with people. It's how I do the work and how I show the work that I've done. And just everything that I do is all circled around that first core value. So if any of our listeners don't have that, go to Stace's website and download that to get started and thinking about you and your business, because everything you do, every interaction you have is a representation of that brand. And whether it's, you know, the guy in line behind you at the deli, or, you know, a boss or friend you might have at work. I mean, I have investors from all aspects of my life, and I have investors that I hadn't talked to in years before I came back and said, hey, I'm raising money. And you know what? They know me, they know who I am, and they will invest with me because of how I go through that framework and how I live my life.
They know what you stand for.
Exactly.
No question. Because you've articulated it through your life clearly. People get it. I mean, it's different for people to see that in your actions versus you telling people, hey, I'm trustworthy, I have integrity. And it's like
that's a good way to have people run away.
Right. Yeah.
And so the whole concept then of trust deep, I think really just puts a button on it. And brings everything down to its core of how do we as entrepreneurs, as business owners, get our customers, our investors, our tenants, our contractors, our vendors to trust us through this framework, through all these things that Stace just spent the last almost an hour sharing with us. So helpful. So Stace, before we go, I'm going to ask you to promote yourself again, tell everyone the website again, but then tell us your true multifamily tip. So if someone is looking to get into multifamily investing, what is your advice for them? And it could be about branding for anything we talked about, or just something from your experience, that you might tell someone, hey, look out for this. So go ahead, start with the website again.
So the website is www.trustdeepagency.com. There are resources there. You can reach out to us if you have questions, things like that. But I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but like something that I've been thinking about is I've been hesitant for I've moved too slowly. So I would say I would take more risks. You have to be intelligent about your risks, but I see so many people who are successful and I see so many people who are hesitant. And for too long, I was just doing this tentatively, right? Just like not moving quickly enough. If other people can do it, I guarantee like the people who are listening are as intelligent or as capable as people who are super successful. If they can do it, you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. So maybe not taking risks, but believing yourself. And I just wish I had believed in the process, because I see people doing it, and I'm like, if I can learn what I'm doing and take it step by step, I can achieve these great things. But it took me a long time to get to this point. I'm a work in progress.
We all are. Well, that excellent tip. Don't be afraid to move forward and push that. Be like the FedEx logo, right? Always moving forward. So.
Right.
Stace, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys missed Stace's website or social links, all of that will be up on our website, truemultifamily.show. You can get his full bio and everything, all his links there. Stace, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks for listening to another episode. Check out our website at truemultifamily.show. And if you have an amazing story to tell, share it on our Facebook community, and you might just be the next guest on the show. We're also on all other social networks. Just search True Multifamily. I'm really, really proud to have the show produced by our company, On Air Brands. Check us out at onairbrands.com. We also have an incredible, unique podcasting event that we would love for you to be a part of. Check that out at podmax.co.